Next question is an excellent one, is how to keep a paint marker from clogging. One needs to understand how a paint marker works before we go into that. Paint marker, unlike a regular marker, has paint in the barrel, which needs to be mixed like any other can of paint that sets for a while. It needs to be shook thoroughly to the solvent and the pigment tend to separate. You need to shake it really well, and then after you shake it really well, you pump the tip until you get paint. After you've used a paint marker, you have paint in the tip of the marker now. And here's where a lot of people go wrong. So they put the cap back on. First is you want to put the cap on well. Hear it snap. The second thing is it's probably a good idea to just store the marker flat, not up or down. Some people say it's better to do it this way, upside down or right side up. Better to just keep it flat. Obviously, like any can of paint, the longer you let it sit and you pull that lid off of a can of paint, there's going to be a skin on the surface of that can of paint. You have a can of paint, it's very easy just to peel that little layer off and go ahead and work. Now, not so with the paint marker. And what happens with paint marker is after you've used that paint marker and then you come back a couple weeks, a couple months later, the tip will dry out, and so you'll try to work and you won't get anything to come out, and then you shake it up and you start pumping the tip again, and all of a sudden paint floods out. What you need to understand is paint has dried in the tip, which was before very porous. The best thing that you can do, if you have a little paint thinner, you can wipe the tip off before you start, but before you start using the marker again, you want to shake it very thoroughly because it's going to be separated, and you only want to pump it once. You don't want to go overboard. If you go overboard and pump it when there's paint in here, you're going to get, it's going to start to drip like that. And you need to understand there's nowhere for the paint to go. When this tip was normally very porous, now it's clogged with paint. So you have to slowly introduce paint into here. Pump it once. A marker that's been sitting for a long time may want to run like that. You need to get a paper towel and just wipe it off a little bit. Let the solvent soak back into the tip to basically take it from the hard to soft again, so it can operate properly. Need to understand that this is a porous tip in here, and if everything's dried in there, it needs to have solvent introduced back so it'll operate properly. And a very common problem with paint markers is that tip dries in there, and then people try to use it and everything drips and gets ugly. Patience is the key. If you have paint thinner and it's a solvent-based paint marker, wipe it off with that. If it's a water-based paint marker, try to wipe your tip off with that. Pump it once and let the solvent reintroduce it. It may have to sit for a few minutes, but it won't work the same as a brand new one. After there's paint in there and it dries in there, it will have a tendency not to act the same, and you have to go a little bit slower. But once you get solvent introduced back in there, it should be fine in a few minutes. Most people don't wait and they start pumping like crazy, and then they start leaking all over the place. And I'm going to demonstrate that right now. And the marker's working great, but if the tip's all clogged and you paint and you go again, you're going to get that result right there, which is a very undesired result, of course. You can even go as far as pulling the tip out and soaking it in paint thinner if it's an oil-based or solvent-based marker.